I would like to welcome every listener into this series where we will learn biblical principles that will transform us, instruct us in our ways, and take us into the things that God has in store for us. The fact that Moses, a man of weakness, lived in the strength of God is only an indication that the life of Moses brings out some very important principles that will sustain us on the journey and empower us to step into our destiny. In this introductory message, I'm focusing on the need to make faith responses and not fear reactions in our relationships with people. God has called us to love people and not fear them. Trusting God empowers us to relate effectively, but fear makes us negative, defensive, suspicious, and eventually becomes a source of trouble in every relationship. When fear finds a place in a relationship, it stirs up trouble. Proverbs chapter 29 verse 25 says, "The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe." As we relate to people, we don't always know who's going to be faithful and loyal and true. But if we trust God, we will be empowered to make faith responses and not fear reactions in our relationships. Now, before we embark on discovering truths from the life of Moses, we need to briefly look at the role played by the last great leader who came before him, and that was Joseph. So in this message, we are looking at that interim period after Joseph had passed away and before Moses was born. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, made Joseph the prime minister because of his great wisdom, his sound leadership, and his godly character. Joseph played a vital role in global leadership during his time, and therefore he grew in credibility before men and favor in the sight of God. But there came a time when Joseph and his generation passed away, and a new king sat upon the throne of Egypt, one who did not know Joseph and the amazing blessing that Joseph had been. As a result, the people of Israel, who were increasing in numbers and strength, were now looked upon as a threat by the new king of Egypt. The king of Egypt started to fear the Israelites, and as a result, his relationship with them was a series of fear reactions that led to serious trouble. Take a look at Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 to 14. "Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. And so the new king made a wrong response to the people of Israel. He feared the people of Israel. He said, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Meaning they might overtake us. They might overpower us. Just look at them, how they are growing in numbers, in physical and material strength. As a result, the king of Egypt reacted out of fear. You see, in every circumstance we have two options. We can either make faith responses or fear reactions. A faith response is based on the principle that although things seem to be out of my control, yet God is in full control over my circumstance. A fear reaction is based on the principle that I need to control the circumstance at all times or all will be lost. In a faith response, we rest upon what God can do. In a fear reaction, we restrict ourselves to what we can do. Faith responses will therefore take us into a place of strength and stability, but fear reactions will take us into a place of weakness. The new king of Egypt, who was overcome by fear, opened the doors to his own failure, which would affect the entire nation in the years to come. What did he do next? Next, he schemed against them. He said, "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them." You see, if there's fear on the inside, it will show itself on the outside through the things that we do. Fear cannot be concealed, it cannot be suppressed, it cannot be ignored. It must be dealt with, or it will become a troublemaker. The new king of Egypt reacted wrongly and schemed against the people of Israel. That was a fear reaction. Egypt would have to bear serious consequences later on for the fear reactions of this particular king. Fear reactions can set us on a pathway of error that invite the disfavor of God. Later on, God had to send 10 plagues upon the nation of Egypt in order to soften their hearts towards the people of Israel. Why? Because the fear reaction of the king of Egypt overflowed into a scheme against Israel, and that scheme eventually became a way of life with all the Egyptians. Therefore, when God sent Moses to bring the people out into freedom, God had to deal not just with one man, but with the whole nation. It took 10 serious acts of God's wrath to bring the Egyptians into realization that what they were doing was wrong. So fear can lead us into schemes, and those schemes become a way of life that take us into a place of insensitivity towards God. So he feared them. He schemed against them. What did he do next? Then he oppressed them. Fear is the perfect environment for oppression to set in. The king of Egypt dealt unjustly with them. He made them into slaves, enforcing hard labor upon them. Don't forget that they came into Egypt as honored guests under the prime ministership of Joseph, but now they were reduced to the position of slaves. Fear caused the king of Egypt to devalue the people and put them on a level where their potential could never be realized. Here we see why a fear-filled relationship is easily damaged. We can never bring out the best in people whom we fear, because we will fear that they might become better than us. We can never be a leader to people whom we fear, because we will fear that they may not follow. We cannot help people whom we fear, because it is difficult to get close to people whom we are afraid of. But if we look back at the book of Genesis, we see that the old King Pharaoh dealt totally differently with Joseph and the people of Israel. He honored Joseph and loved him and gave him opportunities. He promoted him from prisoner to prime minister. Let's take a read of Genesis chapter 41, verses 38 to 45. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot, and they called out before him, "Bow the knee." Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. And so you see, although the old King Pharaoh did not know much about God, yet we see the grace of God at work in him, because by honoring and loving Joseph, he was making faith responses and opening the doors of blessings upon himself and upon the land of Egypt. And so God does not want us to live our lives fearing people, but rather honoring and loving people. He wants us to bring out the best in people, to be a source of inspiration to people, to encourage people into their potential. If we fear the people who we deal with on a daily basis, that fear will get us into trouble. But God empowers us to live by faith and not by fear, to make faith responses and not fear reactions. 1 John chapter 4 verse 18 tells us, "The perfect love of God casts out fear." So I just want to welcome you all to go with me into this exciting series and let the Word of God challenge us and change us as we progress deeper into the knowledge of God.